You open your eyes in the heart of Jerusalem, where the air is stretched tight as a string and the walls tremble with whispers and anxiety. Today, your city is a theater where luxury, fear, envy, and the exhaustion of centuries have all mixed together. Before you unfolds not a celebration, but a tense spectacle of power. A new king will ascend the throne, but no one knows whether this day will bring wisdom or new troubles. You see splendor and filth, hopes and curses blending together in the streets, and you realize that behind every glint of gold hides exhaustion, and behind every prayer, a whisper of distrust. This is the coronation of Solomon, but no one really believes that the world will change. But before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. You awaken before dawn, not in your own bed, but on a rough mat hastily unrolled in a corner of someone's flat roofed house. The city of Jerusalem stretches all around you, uneven, cluttered, ancient even by the standards of ancient people. The air is dry, and the light is dim, the color of watered mud. Someone somewhere is already up, grumbling about water, about goats, about the never ending obligations of the living. You lie still, listening to the sound of a civilization reluctantly stirring to life. There is nothing romantic about it. Your back hurts. You rise, as do thousands of others across the city. The first thing you notice is the dust. It seeps through every crack and gap, settling on faces, beards, and the folds of your best garment, which you are saving for later. Today is not just any day. It is the day of the coronation of Solomon, son of David. You are not entirely sure what that will mean for you. Personally, it is likely nothing at all, but you will watch, because it is the sort of thing one does when history happens in your city. You cross the small, cluttered space, careful not to step on your host's children. Outside, the alleys are alive with sound and motion. Traders are already setting out their wares in case the celebration brings the promise of business. Bakers fan their fires, and the comforting smell of bread briefly masks the usual odors: sweat, dung, dampness, and the sharp scent of olive oil. You remember, with some irony, how often you have been told that Jerusalem is the city of God, the chosen place, and today is meant to prove it. The truth is less impressive. The city is a patchwork of homes, markets, and alleys, jammed against a wall that has been built, rebuilt, and patched so many times it is impossible to know which stone belongs to which century. There is no grandeur to be found in the small, private struggles of daily life. And yet, somewhere above you, someone is hanging out expensive cloth, a rare purple if you squint, trying to make the neighborhood look festive. The city is not sleeping. All through the night, there have been sounds: the scraping of carts, the complaints of soldiers, the distant, mournful wailing of a dog left outside the city gates. You see your neighbor, always the first to complain, arguing with the vendor about the price of dried figs, as if national destiny depends on such things. Perhaps it does. At least, it makes you wonder if anything truly changes from reign to reign, from one king to the next. As the sun finally rises, the city's inhabitants seem torn between excitement and dread. The coronation means a day off from the ordinary. No one will be forced to labor, at least for the duration of the ceremony. But it also means crowds, heat, and the possibility that something, somewhere, will go terribly wrong. After all, David's death was not exactly smooth, and there are always rivals lurking, dreaming, plotting. You make your way up a narrow street toward a spot where you might glimpse the processional route later. Every few steps, you are jostled by people you do not recognize. The faces in the crowd are tense, alert, as if everyone is waiting for the next shoe to drop. The children are excited, tugging at their mother's sleeves and pointing toward the palace hill. The old men are less enthusiastic, muttering about the good old days when Saul was king, or perhaps someone even earlier who did things properly. Along the way, you catch fragments of conversation. Some men debate the wisdom of making Solomon king at all. He is too young, too clever, or perhaps not clever enough. Others gossip about which tribes will support him, which will not, and whether the priests have hidden agendas. The city is a labyrinth of suspicion and alliances, all wrapped in a thin veneer of ceremony and piety. Passing the market, you see that everything is more expensive today than it was yesterday. There are new stalls selling cheap souvenirs, tiny models of the temple, wooden crowns, and poorly painted figurines that look only vaguely like Solomon. You are not sure if the king would be flattered or insulted by such likenesses. Maybe both. You finally reach a place with a decent view of the road. From here, you can see the palace's walls, draped in banners, and further beyond, the hazy outline of the temple, which is not yet finished, but already the pride of the city. Somewhere up there, the high priests are preparing the oil, the crown, and the scrolls, an entire apparatus of legitimacy and tradition that no one fully understands, but everyone pretends to respect. As you settle in, the anticipation is almost palpable. More people arrive, crowding around you. Someone sneezes, someone else tries to sell you stale bread. The sun climbs higher, bringing with it the threat of heat and dehydration. You wonder, not for the first time, whether all this pageantry is worth it. But what else is there to do? History is happening, and you are here to watch it, dusty, tired, unimpressed, and yet, despite everything, a tiny bit hopeful that today will bring something new. The city buzzes, the priests chant, the guards look bored, the rich parade in their finest, watched by the poor who mutter and dream. And you, in the midst of it all, stand witness to the beginning of a new reign, one that promises wisdom, prosperity, and peace, at least according to the official proclamations. But you have lived long enough to know better than to believe everything you hear. Still, you watch. After all, It is not every day that a new king is crowned in Jerusalem. You press yourself forward, carried by the slow, grinding momentum of the crowd that floods every street leading up to the Temple Mount. It is not as if you have a choice in the matter. The narrow alleys of Jerusalem were never designed for pageantry, much less for the great rivers of humanity that now surge uphill in search of a view. Your neighbors jostle you on every side, sometimes with apologies, more often with the blank, hardened indifference of those long accustomed to being packed together like olives in a jar. If you squint, you can almost convince yourself that the city is beautiful today. Rich banners ripple from the heights of stone walls. There are long swaths of costly purple cloth draped between windows, tied off with cords borrowed for the occasion. The wealthier citizens, those who own more than a single garment and more than a single room, have set out their best. Golden bowls, polished copper, whatever tokens of status can be safely displayed in public without inviting a thief's attention. The sun, high and relentless, gleams off every surface, lending even the cracked limestone an air of ancient dignity. Yet, when you look closer, the cracks are all you can see. Jerusalem is still Jerusalem, noble in name, but stubbornly shabby in detail. Everywhere there is noise, grit, and the inescapable smell of sweat and burning fat. The ground underfoot is sticky with the dregs of spilled wine and the detritus of last night's feasting. In some alleys, dogs quarrel over bones. A pair of children race past, one clutching a chunk of bread, the other a handful of sticky dates, both shrieking with the sort of joy only children can manage at a royal event. You are swept along, sometimes pausing as the crowd bunches up at a turn, sometimes shuffling forward, trying to preserve your dignity. There are moments when you catch a glimpse of the city's famed splendor, the white gleam of unfinished temple stones, the vast, almost impossible architecture that is both promise and threat. But most of the time, you see only the backs of other heads, curly, shorn, covered in dust, and hear only the complaints of your fellow travelers. Behind you, a pair of women argue in voices sharp as flint over whose husband deserves the best seat. Ahead, a merchant shouts about his supply of dried figs and sweet cakes, claiming they were baked in the palace kitchens, although everyone knows they came from the same old oven near the fish market. A group of Levites, resplendent in linen, pick their way through the rabble, faces arranged in expressions of haughty forbearance. Children poke fun at them behind their backs, making faces and imitating the way the priests walk, as if levitating above the dust. As you edge closer to the broad avenue that climbs up toward the temple, you find the crowds growing denser and the air heavier. The sun burns through your clothing, and you wipe your brow with the back of your hand, only to find it slick with sweat and grime. Somewhere nearby, a group of soldiers attempts to maintain a semblance of order, their tunics dark with the dust of the street. Their eyes are glazed, their spears more ornamental than threatening. You sense they would rather be anywhere else. You overhear snatches of conversation that feel almost eternal in their subject matter. Old men debate the lineage of kings, citing ancestors whose names you have never bothered to remember. Others speak of taxes, of burdens laid upon them by rulers past and present. You find it darkly amusing that on a day dedicated to celebration, so many seem determined to rehearse their grievances, as if preparing for an argument with the very angels. The city's splendor, you realize, is mostly for show. The beautiful banners are rented, the flowers wilting in the heat, and the perfumes that linger in the air cannot quite mask the underlying odor of too many bodies packed into too small a space. Even the musicians, hired at great expense, play the same tired songs, looking bored as they pluck their lyres and beat their tambourines. Only the youngest children, allowed to climb atop their father's shoulders, seem genuinely delighted by the spectacle, squealing as processions of noblemen pass by, all trying their best to look important. As the crowd pushes toward the temple, you are hemmed in by bodies on every side. You cannot move quickly or freely, but then neither can anyone else. You catch sight of a wealthy family, robes dyed a rare and costly blue, making their way toward the front with an air of practiced entitlement. Their servants clear a path, not with force, but with the subtle intimidation of the privileged. Around you, people mutter under their breath, envy flickering in their eyes. Here and there, you see flashes of resentment, carefully hidden, but real nonetheless. Your progress slows as you near the gates of the Temple Mount. Soldiers form a living barrier, stern faced and unmoved by pleas for a better view. Only the truly important, priests, officials, and the well connected, are allowed inside. The rest of you are left to press your faces against the crowd, craning your necks for a glimpse of the coming drama. As you wait, you recall tales told by your grandfather, stories of how, in the days of Saul and David, things were different. The city was smaller, the ceremonies simpler, the people more unified. You doubt this very much. Nostalgia, you suspect, is just another word for forgetfulness. Still, it comforts you to imagine that once the city was less complicated, less crowded, less petty. You pass the time listening to the constant hum of gossip. There are endless rumors about Solomon, his wisdom, his many brothers, his relationships with the high priest and with the court officials. Some say he is favored by God, others that he is the tool of ambitious men. Some whisper about conspiracies, about the shadow of his father's mistakes, and about the blood that stains even the brightest banners. It is all so familiar and so very tiresome. Someone tries to sell you a seat on a barrel at a price that would have fed your household for a week. You refuse, and the seller shrugs, moving on to the next mark. Around you, children pester their parents for sweets, and dogs sniff hopefully at dropped crusts. Every so often, a dignitary's litter passes by, surrounded by a cloud of dust and a chorus of polite bows, and for a moment the crowd hushes, only to erupt again in a wave of commentary. You marvel, in a dry, exhausted sort of way, at the persistence of human ambition. All this trouble, all this spectacle, so that one man can wear a crown and be declared king. What changes, really? The names, perhaps, and the faces. The weight of taxes and the rhythm of the seasons remain the same. The city endures, and so do its people, weathering kings and calamities alike. The sun climbs ever higher, and the heat becomes oppressive. Your thoughts grow sluggish, your feet ache, and you long for a cup of cool water. The banners above you flutter, brilliant in the sunlight, while the banners below, yourself and your fellow citizens, sweat and jostle and murmur. You suspect that even Solomon, somewhere behind those high walls, is feeling the strain. Time drags on. There are moments of excitement. The distant sound of trumpets, the brief appearance of an official in a plumed headdress, the rumor that the king himself will soon appear. But mostly, there is waiting, long, uncomfortable, crowded waiting. The crowd becomes a living thing, shifting and sighing as one. You feel both part of it and entirely alone, an observer among thousands of other observers. Eventually, the noise swells, and you realize that the ceremony is about to begin. Somewhere ahead, the priests are gathering, the officials are taking their places, and the guards are straightening their tunics and spears in anticipation. The tension in the air is unmistakable. The city holds its breath. You brace yourself, ready for whatever comes next. For now, you are simply another body in the crowd, anonymous, dusty, a witness to history. And as the first solemn notes of the coronation hymn rise above the clamor, you cannot help but smile just a little at the grandeur and absurdity of it all. You find yourself wedged against a low wall, just within sight of the temple courts, your vantage point hard won through a combination of patience, shuffling, and a few accidental elbows delivered to strangers who will never remember your face. The noise of the crowd has swelled to a dull roar, and the air vibrates with the anticipation of something that is supposed to be momentous, though what that is, besides another long ceremony, remains unclear to you and, you suspect, to many of your neighbors. The center of the city, for all its sacred reputation, is neither quiet nor serene. Temple servants dash back and forth, carrying vessels of oil, bowls of water, stacks of ceremonial bread that have been sprinkled with herbs in patterns nobody will remember by midday. The high priests, resplendent in linen and gold, make a point of moving slowly, as if each measured step is a small act of defiance against the chaos that bubbles at the city's edge. You watch them, feeling the strange satisfaction of seeing important men attempt the impossible, to look above it all, to act as if their actions are not absurdly theatrical. The priests gather near the great altar, their voices rising in chant, a sound you know is meant to be awe-inspiring, but which, after the 10th repetition, settles into a background drone. Incense drifts in slow curls, failing to cover the odor of sweating bodies and the faint coppery tang of animal blood from earlier sacrifices. On every side, you see faces tilted skyward, waiting, hoping for something extraordinary, but already preparing to be disappointed. The official dignitaries arrive, each attempting to convey both humility and superiority as they take their places. There is the high priest, his robes stiff with embroidery, flanked by underpriests, whose job, you suspect, is to look as uncomfortable as possible without actually fainting. There is Benaiah the commander, his beard freshly oiled, eyes roving the crowd for signs of trouble, or more likely, for people who might owe him a favor. The elders of Israel shuffle to their benches, some old enough to remember the last coronation, and some so new that their robes still itch. The pageantry is both impressive and wearying. Trumpets blare, their notes echoing off stone and making even the bravest child flinch. A squadron of Levites, bearing instruments of every shape and size, is arrayed at the temple steps, their music simultaneously solemn and repetitive. You suspect the rehearsals have gone badly, but no one dares to complain on a day like this. Then comes the moment the crowd has been waiting for. Solomon himself appears at the top of the steps, surrounded by a knot of advisers, and his mother, Bathsheba, who walks with a dignity born of surviving court intrigue. Solomon is younger than you expected, neither particularly tall nor striking, but with a calmness that unsettles even the most cynical onlooker. He is dressed in a robe of deep blue, embroidered with golden pomegranates and bells, a garment so heavy it must be torture to wear in the heat. A hush falls over the multitude, the kind of silence that is not truly silent, but full of breath, shifting feet, the flutter of banners in the wind. The high priest steps forward and begins the anointing, dipping his fingers into oil so precious that its scent reaches even you, far from the altar. The oil is applied to Solomon's forehead, a gleaming mark visible to all. The gesture is loaded with meaning, but you suspect most people are too busy craning their necks for a better look to ponder its spiritual significance. The coronation proceeds with a precision that hints at countless previous rehearsals and a deep, unspoken terror of doing anything wrong in public. The priest intones blessings, the crowd murmurs assent, and the officials nod at appropriate intervals. It is a spectacle of agreement, a grand performance where everyone knows their part, but none seem particularly convinced of the lines. You cannot help but notice the fatigue etched into every movement. The priests blink in the sun, their hands sticky with oil and sweat. The musicians, having run through their third chorus, play on with mechanical determination. Even Solomon, standing still at the heart of it all, looks less like a man assuming greatness and more like someone enduring an endless ceremony, because to do otherwise would be unthinkable. There is, inevitably, an undercurrent of fear. Jerusalem has seen too many rivalries, too many abrupt changes, too many days when celebration gave way to blood. Even now, the guards watch the crowd as much as the king, their eyes scanning for dissent, for angry faces, for the subtle shift in the crowd that precedes panic or revolt. Somewhere on the edge of hearing, an old woman whispers a blessing or a curse, depending on your perspective. The crown itself is brought out, a weighty circle of hammered gold studded with a dozen gems of dubious origin. It glitters in the sunlight, impressive from a distance, somewhat battered up close. As the high priest places it on Solomon's head, there is a moment of genuine tension, a flicker of possibility that something, anything, might go wrong. But nothing does. The crown sits, the crowd cheers. It is then that the speeches begin. They are long, filled with familiar platitudes about wisdom, justice, peace, and the unique destiny of Israel. The high priest invokes the names of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Solomon thanks the assembly for their faith and support. You catch a few words here and there, but most of it blends together into a kind of ceremonial haze. Even the wind seems bored, barely bothering to ruffle the king's elaborate robe. There is, however, an undeniable pageantry. Standards wave, trumpets sound, and pigeons, disturbed by the noise, take flight above the temple courts. The great doors of the sanctuary swing open, a gesture so dramatic you wonder how many times it has been practiced in secret. For a brief moment, the sun catches on the golden implements inside, blinding the crowd with its radiance. Children gasp. The old men cross themselves reflexively. You squint, wondering how much of the gold is real and how much is simply well polished bronze. It is all, you realize, a kind of sacred theater. Each movement, each word, has been prescribed for generations. The scrolls have been consulted, the rituals double checked. The outcome, it seems, was never in doubt, and yet the entire city watches as if this particular performance might alter the course of history. You doubt it. Still, you watch with the rest, caught up in the machinery of tradition. As the ceremony draws to its official conclusion, a final blast of trumpets rings out, and Solomon descends the steps, followed by his court. The crowd erupts, some with genuine joy, others because it is what is expected. There are shouts, songs, a rain of petals thrown from rooftops. A beggar near you begins to dance, perhaps hoping that the new king's generosity will be more than just talk. You watch the newly crowned king move among his people, bestowing blessings and brief smiles, his guards ever watchful. You notice that for every hand extended to him, there is another clasped behind a back, hiding a secret or a grudge. The city is never more itself than on a day like this. Outwardly united, inwardly divided, always poised between celebration and suspicion. At last, the procession moves away from the temple. The crowds begin to disperse, and you are left with the fading echoes of music and the taste of dust on your tongue. The grand spectacle has ended. The day, however, is far from over. You stand still for a long moment, the world spinning around you, and wonder if anything has truly changed. A new king wears a crown. The banners will be taken down, the oil will dry, and the city will return to its ordinary, unremarkable life. Perhaps tomorrow there will be new decrees, new taxes, new rumors. For now, though you have witnessed the coronation, not just the birth of a reign, but the relentless, exhausting continuation of all the reigns that came before. You turn away from the temple, moving with the current of your neighbors toward the palace, where a feast, so the rumors say, awaits. Already the spectacle of sacred theater is giving way to the more familiar drama of food, drink, and whispered intrigue. The sun is past its peak, and the shadows in Jerusalem grow long. The coronation has ended. The real business of kingship and of life begins anew, mired in the same dust, the same hopes, and the same quietly stubborn endurance of the city and its people. You drift with the tide of people pouring away from the temple, following the river of bodies that snakes toward the palace. The process is neither fast nor dignified. Jerusalem's streets, baked by the afternoon sun, crowded with celebrants and opportunists, are now thick with the heat, the dust, and the inescapable tang of too many people who have spent too much time pressed together. The banners hang limply from the walls. The flowers that seemed so fresh in the morning now wilt in the dust, their colors dulled, petals already ground under the feet of the retreating crowd. You are not certain what draws you to the palace. Perhaps it is hunger. Your stomach has been muttering complaints since mid morning. Perhaps it is curiosity, the irresistible lure of seeing how the other half, no, the other 1%, celebrates. Perhaps it is simply the need to keep moving, because standing still means being trampled, ignored, or left behind. Whatever the reason, you go, swept forward by the shifting mood of the city, the high note of ceremony dissolving into a low hum of expectation, envy, and tired anticipation. The palace rises above you, larger than you remembered, its stones quarried at extravagant cost and assembled by hands that had no say in how their labor would be celebrated. The gate is flanked by soldiers, not just for show this time. Their faces are set, and their hands rest with practiced ease on the hilts of their swords. You know that most will not be let inside, but hope, like dust, settles everywhere. In the end, you are admitted, not because of who you are, but because you have learned to move with the right mixture of confidence and indifference, slipping through the cracks of protocol as easily as a shadow. Inside, the atmosphere is heavy and strange, as if someone has hung a curtain between the world of ordinary citizens and this world of impossible plenty. The floor is swept, though not as clean as it might appear at first glance. Torches line the walls, but their light is watery in the late afternoon, casting long shadows that ripple as people move. The scent is overpowering: roasted meat, sweet wine, burning resin, sweat, the sour note of nervous ambition. You are jostled again, this time by a man in a robe so bright it hurts to look at directly. He barely notices your existence. You wander the outer edges of the great hall, trying to absorb the sheer excess of it all. At the center are tables piled high with dishes, plates of spiced lamb, bowls of lentils dressed with herbs, cakes soaked in honey and garnished with nuts. Jugs of wine stand in ranks like soldiers awaiting orders. The serving boys are everywhere, barefoot, harried, but determined not to let the platters run empty. Even the bread is stacked in impressive pyramids, as if to remind everyone that scarcity is, for tonight at least, someone else's problem. The guests fill the hall with the sort of noise that only 100 hungry, self important people can make. At the head table, the new king sits between his mother and the high priest, his expression composed, every movement watched and measured. Around them cluster the notables, generals, judges, scribes, and those men whose only talent is the ability to survive every change in regime. They laugh, they toast, they watch each other with the weary calculation of men who know that no meal is ever truly free. You take your portion from a passing servant, a handful of dates, a sliver of cheese, a piece of meat, so tender it falls apart in your fingers, and find a place near one of the stone pillars. From here, you can observe the great and the near great without attracting notice. It is a fine vantage point for a student of human nature or of human folly. The talk around you is less elevated than you might expect. Politics, certainly, but mixed with the everyday concerns that never truly vanish. Two men in faded cloaks debate the price of barley, each convinced the other is a fool. A trio of minor officials compare notes on who managed to wrangle the best seat, all the while glancing over their shoulders at the head table with a mixture of awe and resentment. There is laughter, forced and genuine, and arguments that begin in jest and threaten, occasionally to turn serious. You listen to snippets of conversation drifting from all directions. One woman claims her cousin has seen omens in the sky, three stars arranged like a crown, or maybe a sword. Another insists she overheard a servant say that Solomon will double the city's taxes to pay for all this excess. Someone else mutters that the king's half brother, Adonijah, is nowhere to be seen. The implications hover in the air, unsaid but not unnoticed. A servant passes by with a tray of wine, and you accept a cup, drinking deeply. It is not the best you have ever tasted, but it is wine and it is free. Around you, people begin to loosen. The mood shifts from tense formality to something more familiar, ambition masked by laughter, desire lurking behind every toast. The real business of the city, making deals, forging alliances, extracting promises, happens not in the open, but in the shadows, in whispers exchanged behind fans, in glances traded across the tables. At the king's table, the conversation appears polite, almost ritualistic. The high priest offers blessings and prayers for wisdom, his voice a practiced drone. The generals compliment the new king's composure, perhaps hoping that flattery will secure their positions for another year. Bathsheba watches everything with the calm of a woman who has survived more than one royal intrigue. Solomon himself remains mostly silent, listening with the poise of someone who has learned that the less you say, the less you can regret later. You notice, too, the servants, silent, nearly invisible as they move among the guests, filling cups, clearing plates, delivering coded messages in the form of a folded napkin or an extra portion of meat. They are the eyes and ears of the palace, privy to every careless word. You wonder what they think of the celebration, or if they think of it at all. After a time, the feasting becomes background noise. Your senses are dulled by food and drink, by the endless repetition of the same stories told by different mouths. The hall is hot now, despite the open doors. Someone begins to sing a slow, mournful ballad about the glory of David's reign. The song is interrupted twice by laughter, once by a servant dropping a jug, and once by a chorus of half hearted cheers from the far side of the room. As night deepens, the intrigue grows thicker. Men slip away from the main hall in pairs or trios, returning later with eyes brighter or darker than before. A woman in a green dress is surrounded by admirers, each trying to impress her with stories of their own indispensability to the new king. You see one nobleman argue with his brother over a seat, their voices dropping to a hiss before dissolving into laughter. At the edge of your vision, you see a scribe hurrying from table to table, collecting messages on scraps of parchment. These are not love notes, but the small, practical requests of power, a favor, a warning, a gentle reminder that debts, political or otherwise, do not vanish just because a crown changes heads. You wonder if anyone, even the king, ever manages to keep track of all the promises made and broken on nights like this. The feast grinds on. Plates are cleared, then replaced. Wine flows, then runs out, then appears again as if by magic. The talk grows louder, rougher. Someone proposes a toast to the wisdom of Solomon, and the hall erupts in a cheer that sounds more mocking than admiring. Someone else, less discreet, toasts the patience of Jerusalem, and this time the laughter is real. By now, the guests are divided into cliques, some basking in the warmth of royal favor, others lurking in corners, plotting the best route to survival should the winds shift. You find yourself almost invisible, an observer immune to both flattery and suspicion. It is a rare gift, and you savor it. Late in the evening, the king finally rises, signaling the end of the formal celebration. The hall quiets instantly, the sudden hush almost reverent. Solomon thanks the assembled guests with practiced humility, his words measured, his gaze even. He speaks of unity, of the hope for peace, of the burdens of leadership. It is a fine speech, delivered with all the sincerity that can be mustered after a day spent under the scrutiny of a city that is never truly satisfied. The guests file out, some lingering in hopes of a private word with the king or his advisers. Servants begin the slow, thankless work of cleaning up, scraping bones from platters, mopping spilled wine, retrieving lost sandals from beneath the tables. The palace, so bright and crowded an hour before, now seems a little smaller, a little lonelier. You slip away, unnoticed. Outside, the city is quieter, the crowds dispersed, the alleys full of the echoing footsteps of those who celebrated too much or not enough. The stars are bright over Jerusalem, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. As you make your way home, you realize the real feast was never on the tables, but in the shifting alliances, the whispered promises, the petty triumphs, and losses that fill every royal hall. Tomorrow, the city will wake with a headache, the banners will be pulled down, and life will resume its usual rhythm. But for one night, at least, you have seen the machinery of power up close, its pageantry, its hunger, and its endlessly recycled hopes. You reach your door and pause, looking back once more at the palace. The music inside fades. Somewhere, another plot is already unfolding. You are tired, but you are also, in a strange way, content. History has passed through you, and you have survived it, fed, bemused, and a little wiser for the next coronation. You find yourself outside at last, alone, beneath a sky the color of smudged bronze. Jerusalem stretched below like an exhausted animal sprawled across the ancient hills. The night is not truly dark. Lamps flicker in doorways, torches gutter in the hands of lingering guards, and the afterglow of the day's spectacle clings stubbornly to the edges of roofs and courtyards. You take the long way home, letting the winding streets unravel at your feet. There is no rush. History is over, for now. The crowds that surged through the city only hours ago have dissolved. Only their traces remain. The litter of petals, the echo of laughter, a dropped sandal here, a sticky cup there, a piece of purple thread snagged on a stone. You pass a pair of boys, picking over the debris for anything of value, their faces sharp with hunger and opportunity. In the distance, someone sings, a wavering note that rises and falls, full of longing and leftover wine. You find your way to a rooftop, not your own, but in Jerusalem, no rooftop truly belongs to anyone for long. You settle on the edge, legs dangling, the stones still warm beneath you. Below, the city breathes, a merchant closing his shutters, a mother scolding her children, a dog sniffing at the spoils of the festival. You watch as the last of the revelers make their way home, moving with the uncertain dignity of people who want to appear sober and successful, even if neither is quite true. From here, the city is a patchwork of shadows and lights. The palace looms, its windows bright and impenetrable, promising secrets you will never know. The temple is more solemn, silent now, the doors shut against the night, and whatever ghosts may wander the courtyards. You remember the spectacle of the coronation, the heavy crown, the thunder of the crowd. It seems, from this distance, both magnificent and meaningless, a story already slipping into legend before the oil has dried on the king's brow. The city's silence is not absolute. Here and there, you catch fragments of life, continuing as it always does. Somewhere, a couple argues in the privacy of their home, their voices muffled but unmistakably sharp. A group of men, drunk on wine and the day's success, sing a song that is both ancient and crude, their laughter bouncing down an alley. You hear the low, rhythmic chant of a priest completing his rounds, offering up a final prayer for peace that sounds to your ears like a plea for mere survival. You think of Solomon, the new king, so recently a boy, now burdened with the endless expectations of a people who believe or pretend to believe that wisdom and justice can be conferred by oil, by ceremony, by the weary consent of a city desperate for good news. You wonder what he thinks as he sits in his chamber, surrounded by courtiers and shadows. Perhaps he is already weary, already plotting, already longing for a simpler life. Or perhaps he is caught in the same half dream as the rest of Jerusalem, trying to convince himself that something important has changed. You remember the faces in the crowd: hope, suspicion, indifference, the fleeting spark of joy that came and went with the music. You remember the pageantry, the speeches, the parade of dignitaries so desperate to be seen, to be remembered, to be reassured that they matter. You think of the old men muttering about the past, of the young ones scheming for the future, of the children already asleep and dreaming of a world where kings are wise and life is fair. The irony is not lost on you. For all its grandeur, for all the careful choreography of the day, Jerusalem feels unchanged. The stones are still cracked, the alleys crooked, the bread still unevenly baked. Tomorrow will bring new proclamations, new taxes, new complaints. Some will profit, some will lose, and most will simply endure. The city will carry on, as it always has, indifferent to the dreams and fears of those who live and die within its walls. You sigh and lean back, watching as clouds gather above the hills, turning the stars to watery blurs. You wonder how many coronations these stones have witnessed, how many kings have paraded through these streets, promising wisdom and justice and peace. You wonder how many more will come, and how many will be remembered only as names, sometimes even less, fading with the generations until only the stones recall their weight. The night deepens. Somewhere below, a lamp flickers out. A dog howls, answered by another, then silence falls again. You feel the weariness of the day settle into your bones, a heaviness that is not unpleasant, merely inevitable. You think of your own small place in this great machinery, neither important nor entirely invisible, a witness to a moment that will be rewritten 100 times before it is allowed to become history. You rise finally, stretching stiff limbs and brushing dust from your tunic. As you make your way down the narrow stairs, you hear voices from the neighboring roof, laughter, the clink of pottery, the murmur of someone telling a story that is already growing in the telling. You walk home in the near dark, your path lit by the moon and the memory of torches. At your door, you pause, looking back once more at the sleeping city. Jerusalem sprawls, ancient and impassive, its walls holding centuries of triumph and loss, hope and disappointment. You think of tomorrow, of the slow grind of days that will follow, the markets, the arguments, the small kindnesses and cruelties that make up a life. You think of Solomon, his crown already heavy, his wisdom yet untested. Inside, your home is quiet. You wash your face, eat a piece of leftover bread, lie down on your mat. Outside, the city rustles and sighs. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, and you will rise again to play your part in the endless theater of Jerusalem. As you drift toward sleep, you cannot help but smile, just a little, at the irony of it all. For all the banners and speeches, for all the gold and glory, the city endures, not because of its kings, but in spite of them. The true grandeur of Jerusalem lies not in its ceremonies, but in the stubborn, weary, hopeful persistence of those who call it home. You close your eyes. The night settles over the city, heavy with dreams, with memories, with the knowledge that history is nothing more than the long, slow accumulation of days exactly like this one, full of dust, hunger, laughter, and the quiet, unremarkable miracle of survival.